Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about The Haunting of Bly Manor, Episode 2. It's called The Pupil. So, full spoilers for the episode, as always. So, it's taken me a week to get to this episode, which maybe gives you an idea of how enthusiastic I was after episode 1. But I was determined to get back and try another episode or two and see how I felt. And this episode maybe gives us a better glimpse of what the show is actually going to be like episode to episode, although I'm sure many of you watching this now have finished the whole thing because it's been a week. But this episode gives us a bit more backstory into Miles and just exactly how he got kicked out of his school and his boarding school that he was supposed to be away at. And it's a very interesting structure of an episode because there's a point where, there's a little bit of introductory stuff at the start for about 5 minutes or so, and then it goes to the flashback stuff at the school. And I thought, oh, we're going to get flashbacks to his time at school during the episode, thinking that maybe we'll cut back and forth and we'll get a sort of sprinkling of flashbacks throughout. And it didn't do that. So after about 10 minutes of almost entirely being in the flashback, I thought, oh, is this just going to be bookended with modern stuff? Is this just going to be all at the main story of the episode is the school, and then at the end we'll come back for 5 minutes or so of like the bookended material at the end? And it wasn't even that either. It was kind of this weird in between where we had a flashback at the school, which I think traditionally in most shows would be cut up and sort of sprinkled throughout the episode in maybe 4 or 5 chunks. Instead, this lasted maybe like 15, 20 minutes, something in that range. It was a good. It was just under like half the episode. It was kind of like a really interesting amount of time to spend in one continuous flashback and then cut back and then continue the episode on then from normal. And I'm not complaining here. This is like this might sound like I'm critiquing it. If anything, I'm just kind of pointing out that it's kind of unique. It's kind of interesting that it chose to do it this way. And I think it's maybe because they wanted to have the story of Miles and how he got kicked out of the school play out. They wanted to have us to know why what he was doing at school, how he got kicked out, the lengths he went to, and kind of the heart at the end of it. Because there's a heartfelt thing at the end where he's asking all these questions of his teacher, who, and it's a religious boarding school, so it's a priest, and they he compliments him, and the priest is very understanding of like what he's going through and why he's he's got special circumstances. His parents have both died. That's obviously a lot for a kid to go through. Just ask Batman. And he tries to be understanding when he jumps off of a tree. He claims he fell, but it looked like he jumped. Why he's understanding why he gets into a fight and almost chokes another kid out. And even when he murders the pet bird that he has in the classroom, which obviously brings the head teacher and everyone else involved, he still tries to be sympathetic. He tries to say, look, you have to be apologetic, but like we understand that you're going through something unique. We understand that we can help you with this. You have to make amends for this kind of thing, or and instead of like going down the path you'd hope Miles goes down, he says, I'm sorry I didn't do worse. I'm sorry that I didn't rip off its head and set it on fire. Um, I have to say, the weird thing is that episode 1 for me, I came out of that complaining about the kids and not really enjoying the kids. I think what's so odd about episode 2 is that I thought the flashback stuff with Miles was actually pretty decent. It felt a bit more natural. It felt like we have this kid who's like lashing out, and there's kind of a mystery's not quite the right word because we know what's causing it at its core. We know it's the death of his parents, but there's a bit of mystery as to like exactly what's going through his head and how he's going to lash out next. But it felt a bit more relatable because it was tied more into kind of his troubles, and I think the teacher trying to be this mentor to him and trying to be sympathetic felt very realistic and natural in a way that maybe the more creepy kid stuff of the present day, in the show, obviously not present day to us, it's the 80s, but I it was odd though because I really like the art, the heart at the end of it, where you find out that he's been doing all these extreme things and he's been upping the ante because he wants kicked out. He wants kicked out because his little sister sent him a letter that simply said, "Please come home." So he's doing everything he can, and it makes you like him a little bit that he's willing to like essentially nuke his entire academic career as a child to be there for his sister, which is something that most kids his age would never even put much thought into. Never mind actually caring enough and be smart enough to test the waters and get kicked out. Although the narration can go, the awkward accent and the narration, like I'm done with. I'm done with that. But what I'm trying to get to here is that I did feel this weird shift where once we're in the story in present day in the show, and we're back to Miles in the house with Danny and how he's being with her, I found myself not really liking it that all that much. And one of the things that I didn't really talk about in the first episode, even though I addressed repeatedly that I had just seen a movie adaptation of the same story, and I've seen the 60s movie The Innocents, and that phrase The Innocents even comes up during one of these school sequences. But one of the things that I kind of danced around is that I do know what the ending of the story is. Maybe not exactly how this show's going to tackle it, or what, like, caveats they're going to throw in, or how they're going to maybe expand it a little bit, or whatever. But I know the broad stroke that is present in the other versions, and therefore there is kind of a tedious element to some of this story, knowing what part of the mystery is going to be by the end. Now, admittedly, maybe let's do something different, and maybe I'll be surprised. But at least right now, it is presenting a kind of an interesting hurdle into actually getting engrossed in the main stuff with Danny and the kids interacting with her, and Danny seeing things, and like all of these elements are the harder things to get into, and it's really telling that when it focused in on one character in Miles and just did like a story in his past about why he is the way he is and gave him a little bit of depth, I was really enjoying that side of things. When it cut back to the main house and we have him being creepy with Danny, where he's apologizing but kind of just caresses her a little bit inappropriately, and it's kind of creepy. Right after he's given her flowers, it feels that stuff I wasn't enjoying as much. I wasn't even enjoying like the kid's performance as much, and I don't necessarily blame the kid for this. Obviously, he's been directed to act a little differently, and there's reasons for that, both in the context of what we see in the episode, and also from the context of where I know it's kind of going to an extent. Like I understand why, but I'm just not as into it. What I did appreciate about the back half of the episode is I like the acknowledgement that Danny is quite good at what she does, and her actually trying to discipline the kids, which is something that no one else has actually seemed to do since their parents have died. Even the past nanny, coddled them too much, as we hear from the other characters. Like that stuff, I think is interesting. In fact, one of the little beats that I enjoyed before the flashback stuff, which was a sort of a foreshadowing, if you will, if you can foreshadow a flashback, if that even makes sense, is when Owen, quotes young Flora when she says, I don't want to go down to the basement, it's perfectly dreadful, because obviously in the last episode she was saying perfectly splendid left and right. He says, sometimes brothers can be perfectly dreadful. And she has this little moment where she goes, no, he's not. He's really not. There's this little moment where she kind of sticks up for Miles, even though he did, we saw him be kind of a dick and throw her doll down the chute. I appreciated that in hindsight. Once we actually got to the end of the flashback, and it was like, no, he actually does really care about his sister, and it did give it another layer, which I really appreciate. It's kind of a frustrating episode for me because I do think it's better than episode 1. There's legitimate things in this episode that I think are well handled, and moments that are well directed, and even a nice little surprise. Obviously it builds up to them playing hide and seek, where because they've spent the day cleaning and gardening and helping with the cooking, Danny gives them this reward of, okay, let's play a game before bed, and Flora picks hide and seek. And it ends up, of course, like we end up into the forbidden wing of the house, and we end up with seeing the photo of the parents. But one of the little moments, which is generally quite a good little beat, I thought, was Flora. You see this creepy ghost like sort of rising up behind her with the face kind of missing, and it's really a great visual. And the music's building up to her like finding, and realizing that there's this creepy thing behind her. And even with a previous knowledge of the show, or with the story from other versions, it was actually a really cool moment when she turns around, and instead of screaming, instead of getting scared because she's a little girl and there's a creepy ghost behind her, she just says shh. Like, this is not a big deal to her. She's seen this. She knows the ghosts are in the house. Miles seems to as well, because Miles talks about how, why can't the good people come back? It's always the bad people. And talks about the idea of letting demons in. That was one of the big things, the teacher's lesson. That he was talking about the passage from the Bible, and talking about I mean, I'm not familiar with any of this stuff, so I can't directly quote you or anything on what he was talking about, but the idea that the demons needed permission to get into a human, and he has to kind of like explain that point because Miles asked the question, says yes, even the people, they have to give permission because we have the option of not letting them in, which I think thematically is probably a pretty big deal for the story as a whole, and I think that stuff excites me way more than the actual character stuff, or not the character stuff. That's not fair because it is the character stuff I like. Okay, I'm trying to like break it up into the thing I like and the thing I don't like. The thing I like is when it just focuses on characters and why they're acting the way they are, and thematic stuff like that moment there where it sets up a theme for the show. It sets up a theme for letting evil in or letting ghosts and demons and spirits in, and what that means about character choices throughout, right? And how that kind of ties in to where I know the story roughly goes from the other versions, I think is a really nice little beat. And other moments that are handled. But on the other hand, the actual going through the motions of things being one way and trying to build the horror, I guess, I mean, it's kind of a big indictment for me to say that the horror stuff is the stuff that I'm not enjoying as much, especially since it was generally pretty good in the first season. And there was a couple of good moments. Like I say, that moment with the ghost behind Flora was really well done. And I also thought the visual at the end of, the mysterious man, the guy from season 1. But, right now he's the mysterious. I mean, I can tell from IMDb that his name's Peter. Clearly, solid name choice. But he's, him looking through the frosted glass, or not the frosted, the steamed up glass. It's all, his visuals obscured, but you can see him smiling through the window at Danny at the end. I thought was a much better ending to this episode, and I thought the visual itself was very creepy and looked really good. So I can't even say the horror stuff is where it's failing, because the horror stuff, for the most part, is actually really good. I think, I guess to narrow it down, I guess the horror stuff that I'm not liking is the central psychological horror of Danny, which I'm feeling a little bit, and the kids, to wrap into this, the kids and how Miles specifically interacts with Danny, that stuff I'm not super into. Partly because I feel the performance makes it kind of odd, and it feels a little offbeat to me when I'm watching it, and not in a way that feels like it's adding to the story. And then also because of what I already know about the story, and it feels like I'm kind of going through the motions with some of it, and I don't really want to talk about that or say why, but it is having an effect on my enjoyment of it. And I don't know if it's because it's got that kind of, I'll pick something completely different. So like the others, right? I'm not even going to spoil what the twist in the others is, but I would describe a lot of this as feeling like the others, in the sense that I feel like it's trying to cover up that there's going to be a reveal later on the entire time. I kind of have that feeling throughout. There's all little moments as well where what Mrs. Grows like notices a crack in the wall, but then the gardener doesn't see it. Like little things like that. And there's other character beats, like, why is Danny so like emotional about this pair of glasses that have been cracked when Flora's playing with them. So I mean, and that character beat's fine. I have nothing wrong with that. Like teasing her backstory and why she did flee the country and why she is in the UK, why she is taking this job. Like there is reasons to like be interested in her past. And maybe those episodes that focus on that stuff will make it a lot more compelling. So, I mean, it's a win episode 2 in the sense that I definitely like a lot more than I did before. Like, that's definitely, like, not objectively, that's maybe not the right word, but, unquestionably, there is far more in the positive columns for me after this episode. But there's definitely still things that are not working. Yeah. It's weird. But yeah, what I was trying to say about the others, though, is that with the others, like, I don't like that movie that much. I know people do, but I think that movie's really, I don't know, really mainstream in a really negative way. Like, I feel like, and it doesn't help that it came out after another big movie that had a very similar twist. I won't get into it too deeply, but the others, the entire time, from 5 minutes in, I can just feel it trying to hide what its eventual reveal is going to be. Instead of feeling like it works on its own, it just feels like it's going to wank wank. There's stuff coming. There's stuff going on here, and in a way that I don't enjoy. And it's a really fine line, because there's definitely other things where there is a clear mystery. There is clearly stuff to be revealed that don't make sense yet. So there's definitely different approaches to how you handle those types of like slow builds to eventually revealing something. Because there's tons of stuff I love that is clearly concealing something that's really going on, or clearly concealing a big facet to the plot that's going to change things. You know, a lot of the stuff that we talk about on this channel, when we talk about Mr. Robot, or we talk about, I mean, I don't know if Twin Peaks quite fits into it, because that's like, Twin Peaks is not something you ever expect to be neatly answered by the end. That's not the type of show Twin Peaks ever was. But you know, and there's definitely movies where there's maybe hints that something's going on, but it's not until you get to the end. There's a very kind of almost just. I think The Others is a very good comparison, because there's a tonal kind of similar thing. It also deals with kids. It also deals with a big house. There's a lot of stuff there, but that's not really the facet that I'm kind of like trying to hone in on. It's more a tone, I guess, than anything else. Instead of feeling cerebral, like there's something that I have to uncover, it feels like it's being cute, and I think that bothers me at times. So this was a really weird episode in the sense of all these. There's a lot of moments in the filmmaking, although I have to mention I did not realize that Mike Flanagan does not direct all of this season. In fact, he only directs the first episode. This episode is directed by Kieran Foy, who does the next one, and then it seems to be in pairs until the end, give or take. I think maybe the last two are different people. But Mike Flanagan is not directing the rest of this season. Probably because he's too busy doing things like, you know, Doctor Sleep recently. He's got another King adaptation coming up. He's probably far too busy to be devoting an entire season of directing. But that does make it a little bit, not worrying, but certainly like, oh, okay, all right. So I don't feel as like I'm in safe hands quite in the same way that I did going into the rest of the season. But I will say this episode was not directed by him, so it is encouraging that I did think there were some nice touches in here. Just little moments. I mentioned obviously the smelling through the glass at the end and kind of that tease, who Miles does seem to see as well. But if this is a ghost, then it would make sense that Miles and, you know, Flora seem to both be aware of ghosts and see them anyway. So that would track with what we've learned so far. But it is worth mentioning. Other little touches that I liked in the direction. You know, the moment where the father, the priest, finds the bird, the dead bird. I like how we see his reaction long before we actually see the bird. And even though it's very predictable, that's what it is, because they focused on the bird so heavily in the previous scene that it was kind of like inevitable that's what it's going to be. But there's a little moment where he first walks into the little back area of the church where he's hanging up his robe and whatnot. And as he's walking into there, you can kind of see like a kid, presumably Miles, sort of sneaking around in the background, but he's just out of focus and he's just a shadow basically running across the background. So, you know, it's the sort of thing where it could be a ghost. It probably isn't given the context, but it has that feeling to it. It feels like that kind of thing. So I thought that sequence was really well handled. The actual raw directing of when we're creeping around. I think maybe a big sign of like where I'm feeling with the show right now is if you look at the hide and seek stuff, there was kind of a little moment for me where instead of being excited that we're about to clearly go into stuff that was going to end in horror stuff, I kind of like, oh, here we go, hide and seek. All right, here's a reason to like wander around the house in the dark. I was feeling a little bit cynical, and I think that's more on me than anything else. And just because I'm not feeling the show at 100% yet, so I'm feeling a little bit jaded and cynical about certain tropey elements that are perhaps coming up, even though that's not really the core problems that I'm having with the show so far. But yeah, so you know, and I do think the main plot kind of mirrors the idea that, you know, they're dealing with Miles and the way he's acting out. You know, the gardener, for example, getting mad that he cut up some of her flowers to give to Danny. That moment, you know, it felt very much like one of the earlier scenes in the school where he was being kind of forgiven, because Danny's kind of arguing, look, he's been through a lot, it's just some flowers, let's calm down and we'll try and, you know, give him a chance and whatever. It feels very similar to the you know, the teacher in the school saying similar things when he first did something bad. There's definitely kind of that idea, and you know, arguably it might even be a red herring of the kid escalating, you know, Miles escalating and getting more and more extreme in his actions throughout the season. So yeah, it's a funny one. I think I want to watch another one at least to see how I feel. I want to see if it improves again, and goes further. I do think having the episodes have these different focuses after episode 1 is definitely something to help split it up a little bit. One of my fears when we got to the house was that it was going to be like, 6 episodes or whatever, before we sort of advanced, where it was just creepy things happening in the house and the kids being creepy and just stuff that I'm a little bit tired of in general in the horror genre. And this is not really the show's fault, but I am a little bit sick of the haunted house, haunted mansion movies. Like we kind of had a glut of those over the last decade, and I'm very much ready for the horror genre to do other things. But if it's good, that won't really matter because it'll win me over. And I'm hoping that it still can. And there's definitely signs in this episode that it has it in it. So I'm hoping episode 3 will shake things up and give me again another layer to this that wasn't present already. Because I think that's what this episode did. It gave me another layer to Miles at least, and some thematic touches that have me a bit more encouraged, if not outright kind of singing its praises yet. So yeah, so I will make sure I get to the next one quicker than I did this one. When that means, I'm not entirely sure yet, but I would imagine early in the week would be my guess. So yeah, let me know what you thought of episode 2 of Haunting of Bly Manor. Get me in the comments. You can, of course, liking super important on YouTube. If you enjoy the content and the reviews and all the stuff we do, please do hit the like button. It ensures that we know that you like the content, but also it'll help YouTube share out a bit more, and it's a nice and free way to support us. You can, of course, though, give us some money over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV for as little as $1 per month, and go a bit further with that support and get some bonus content for your troubles. But yeah, otherwise, catch us on Twitter at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. But that is us, so thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any vanilla?